in a biology class. And but hang in there with me. I have a purpose in all of it. And we'll have a quiz. I'm just joking about the quiz, yeah. But I really love what Bob has done through the months and years. When he's Sabbath school superintendent, he'll talk about hummingbirds, about a turtle on the highway, about the lake level, about the spring flowers. Really appreciate it, Bob. And particularly hummingbirds deserve lots of discussion. They are unique in many ways. And, well, for one thing, they're the only bird that can fly backwards. And they also can hover. At the bird feeders at my house, I've seen some sparrows try to hover. And they can do it for a second, maybe, or two. But hummingbirds, wow. They can fly, according to Google, and that's where I'm getting all my information today, is from even the Bible texts I get from Google. And Mr. Google is a wonderful help for any of these presentations. But according to the internet, hummingbirds can fly as fast backwards as they can forwards, and that's 30 miles an hour. And one of the species have an interesting thing they do when the male is trying to court a female. They will fly maybe 130 feet off the ground and take a nosedive toward the ground, and they hit a speed of 60 miles an hour, trying to impress the female hummingbird. And that's just one of the things. But for instance, they can flap their wings as many times as 200 times per second. Per second. They don't always have them going that speed, but when they need to do it, they do it. And 200 times per second actually will create a musical sound. Orchestras tuned to A440, and an octave below that is A220. So it's a little slight bit lower than A below middle C. I'm just going to play it for a second. That's A flat below middle C. And if you're ever around a hummingbird and you hear a note something like that, realize that it's their wings going top speed. 200 times per second, yeah. And their tiny size is what sets them apart from all the other birds. Also, a ruby-throated hummingbird weighs about 3 grams, they say, and that's 1/3 less than a nickel weighs. And yet, the ruby-throated hummingbirds, every year at migration, they fly 500 miles across the Gulf of Mexico with nonstop, of course. And how do they do it? Baffles scientists. They typically need to eat more than their weight in a day's time, and typically feed 7 times an hour, and they It would take 150 of them to weigh 1 pound. So anyway, they've been known to live as many as 12 years, by the way. And people ban these birds, as you know, all kinds of birds. And this goes on all over the continent. I don't know how much they do in other continents and the other hemisphere, but Maggie and I, when we were at Fairbanks, Alaska a few years ago, we took a walk out in the boreal forest, and boreal simply means northern forest, and we went to a cabin where women were banding birds. How do they catch the birds? Well, they have set up in the forest nets of almost invisible nylon line, and with the small or whatever size openings are in the net, the birds don't see the net, and they fly into the net and get caught. And they'll be there until hopefully someone gets by and stuffs them in a bag. But recently, a rufous hummingbird that was banded in Tallahassee, Florida, showed up recaptured at Prince William Sound in Alaska, 3,500 miles from where it was banded. They migrate, and they don't do it in flocks, they do it singly, all by themselves. And 3,500 miles. Amazing stuff. And they have this ability to turn their bodies into a sort of a torpor, they call it, T-O-R-P-O-R. And when they do this, they lower their body temperature from 104, 105, which is normal, down as low as 55 degrees. And at that temperature, we would all be dead, I think. But their heart rate goes from 1,260 times per minute to as low as 50. And they appear to be asleep. And they do this when their energy sources are not sufficient, or when it's cold, and it's their defense against the cold. There are chickadees that are up in Fairbanks, Alaska over the winter in 40 below zero weather, and those skinny little legs, I think they put themselves into a type of a torpor also. But these things really baffle you. When they eat, the hummingbirds, they actually lap the sugar water or the nectar that they're feeding on, and their tongues lap as many as 13 times per second. And their breath rate, 250 times a minute, and that's when they're resting. It's hard to get all these little testing things on them when they're flying, but we figure that their breath rate goes faster than that when they're flying. Okay, so all kinds of things that just baffle us, scientists, anyone. Another one is the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterfly lives only in the Western Hemisphere. They don't occur naturally in the Eastern Hemisphere. But on this continent, there are two basic groups or divisions. Those east of the Rocky Mountains and those west of the Rocky Mountains. They all migrate, and by the millions. Those east of the Rockies, the Rocky Mountains, will migrate to Mexico, and they have a very specific spot in Mexico where they head. They go by the millions down there, and they I don't know whether he's shown any pictures of them in the trees, but it's only certain trees and only in a certain forest and in a certain few acres of Mexico. They've never been there before. They will never return. Their lifespan at most is 9 months. And so no one of all these millions of butterflies has ever been to that spot. The monarchs west of the Rocky Mountains migrate to Southern California for the winter. Okay, let me tell you the cycles and stages of the monarch butterflies. In as early as January or February, their parents will arrive back or begin their way back from the migration places, and they will mate, and the female will lay eggs, and she will only lay eggs on the milkweed plants. Ever seen a milkweed? I haven't seen one for years. But if the day comes when there are no more milkweeds in this world, there will be no more monarchs, apparently, because this is the only thing that the hatching grub or larva or caterpillar, we call it, that becomes a monarch butterfly. This is the only thing that they will eat. And so anyway, in January or February, an egg is laid, and in a couple of days it hatches, and the emerging larva or caterpillar is tiny, tiny, tiny. It eats the eggshell because there are nutrients there, and then it begins eating milkweed. And before it comes out of that stage, it can eat a whole milkweed leaf in less than 5 minutes. And within 10 or 12 days, the caterpillar has increased in weight 3,000 times from where it began. And by that time, it has colorful markings spiraling around its length, and they give an idea of what the colorings of the butterfly will be. Okay, so those are two stages, the egg and then the caterpillar. And then during its growth, the caterpillar has to shed its skin 5 times because it won't hold it forever, increasing that much in size. Each time it eats its skin, and I guess there are nutrients there too. Its only departure from its diet of milkweed. And the 5th time that it sheds its skin, it attaches itself, one end of the caterpillar, to usually the underside of a leaf. it will probably leave the milkweed and go to a place nearby and attach itself there. And then it becomes in what they call the pupa state, or the chrysalis. Maybe you've heard these terms in grade school, I don't know. But when it sheds that fifth shedding of its skin, what's left is a green shell that is it. And this is the pupa. And this is when transformation takes place. And in the Bible, in Romans chapter 12, it tells us, "Be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your minds." This is a miracle in us, but it's a miracle physically for the monarch butterfly. The caterpillar, which had 8 pairs of legs, gets 3 pairs, becomes an insect, not something crawling on the ground or on the plant. Its mouth, its jaws that were very, very, very busy chewing up milkweed disappear. And it gets what's called a proboscis. It's a kind of a straw-like thing. And this will be the means of the emerging butterfly to suck nectar into its mouth and its body. And it will never chew anything again. Its eyes, which it had as a caterpillar and were very poor at defining objects, now are much better in eyesight, and they're much bigger. And of course, the most noticeable thing that is new when it emerges from the pupa are the wings. And that's what people say are gorgeous. Ever seen monarch butterflies? Yeah. They should be just about anywhere that people are. And as you can see probably in the pictures now and then, their coloration, they're orange with black or dark brown veins, and series of itty-bitty white dots around the outline of their wings. But after around 10 days in the pupa stage, the butterfly emerges from the chrysalis. And it may spend an hour drying off, stretching its wings, and letting some things harden that are pretty soft when it comes out of the pupa. And then it takes off in flight. Something it has as the butterfly that it didn't have as the caterpillar is sexual organs. It now can mate, and the female lay eggs, and the cycle starts all over again. A new generation. And if the one I've just been talking about was generation number 1, there will be 3 more generations before it migrates. And in each of those first 3, the adult butterfly can be expected to live only a couple of weeks. The 4th generation butterfly will live as much as 9 months. All these things are repeated every year. But the 4th generation butterfly from up north, wherever it has been hatched and metamorphosed, is what they call it, metamorphosis. The butterfly then will join with the millions of others and make their way down to the place where they winter, which is they'll migrate either to Mexico or to Southern California. So then the whole cycle starts over again. The millions of butterflies may take 2 months to reach their destination. And then about January, February, they will begin a trip back north. They never make it to the destination, the ultimate destination, but in that first couple of weeks, as they start north, they will mate, they will lay an egg, or many eggs, and the stages start over again. The egg hatches, the caterpillar emerges, eats its way to the place where it will have its chrysalis, and then the butterfly transforming and emerging from that. This happens 4 times every year, and it goes on and on and on as long as there are monarch butterflies. It's a bafflement to scientists. As I was reading all this, I was thinking, this stands evolution on its head, doesn't it? It's so much more complex than even the chicken and the egg. Remember that problem the evolutionists have? Which was first, the chicken or the egg? You have to admit that somewhere there was a beginning. And who began it? So there's that. But, you know, when you think about all of this and you begin to remember some scriptures, all these impossibilities or seeming impossibilities remind me, for instance, of something the angel Gabriel told to Mary when he made the announcement that she was going to have a baby who was going to be the Son of God. And Mary said, and how old was she? Maybe even a teenager, probably 20 or less in years. But she asked Gabriel, she said, how can these things be, since I have never known a man? And by that meaning, having a relationship. And Gabriel said this, something that we want to take from this study this morning. He said, with God, you know the rest of it? Nothing shall be impossible. Nothing. That's the same thing the Lord told Sarah and Abraham 2,000 years earlier. Remember that? There, when the angels showed up at Abraham's house, his tent, and Abraham scurried around to fix some food for them, and they ate there. And then 2 of them went on, but the Lord stayed back there with Abraham and Sarah, told them what was going to happen to the cities in the valley. They were going to be destroyed, and Abraham bargained with the Lord. Well, if there are even 50 righteous people there, would you save the city? And so on. You know the story. But also, the Lord told Abraham that he and Sarah were going to have a son. How old were they? Way beyond childbearing years. And you know the story of how Sarah laughed within herself. She was in her tent, but she heard all of this. And the Lord said to her, "Why did you laugh?" She said, "Well, I didn't laugh." But he said, "You did. And about this time next year, you will have a son." And so to give them this thought that I just repeated of Gabriel saying to Mary, the Lord said, "Can anything be impossible with the Lord?" Let's remember that, okay? Because that has so much bearing on our lives today, right? The book of Job says it this way: whether or not evolutionists or scientists can give us their answers that sound decent at all to all of this, Job said it, ask the animals. This is from Job chapter 12. Ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds of the air and they will tell you, or speak to the earth and it will teach you, or let the fish of the sea inform you. Can you get the answers out of these animals? Anyway, which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? We have to have dumb animals tell us something we should know. But they know it. In his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. I like Psalm 145, 4 verses there also. It says, "The eyes of all wait upon thee, and thou givest them their meat in due season. Thou openest thy hand and satisfiest the desire of every living thing. The Lord is nigh unto all them that call upon him, to all that call upon him in truth." Remember that. Call upon his name. He's near. He hears. And he will answer. Let me read the rest. "He will fulfill the desire of them that fear him. He also will hear their cry and will save them." Can we trust him? Can you trust him? Our first parents didn't. They believed a slander against our Lord. Eve accepted the serpent's, the enemy's, lie that God would deprive them of something they deserved to eat. Jesus met the same temptation in the wilderness. He hadn't eaten for 40 days. He could have turned the stones into bread, but he denied himself. And he said this, man, and quoting from Scripture, "Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Father." Well, right now, ask you the question. Are you breathing? Good. You must be alive. Prayer is the breath of the soul. Are you praying? If so, you must be alive spiritually. Have you eaten anything recently? Today, yesterday, or this week? I hope so. Then you'll have some strength in your body. And Job said again, "I have esteemed thy words as more than my necessary food." And Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." And John chapter 6. So if we read his word, if we study, we will have sustenance for our eternal salvation. Yes. So I want to just read a little bit of what Mary said. Well, after Gabriel left her, having made the announcement that she was to bear the Christ child, she, as you read there in Luke, she left Nazareth in haste, went to the Judean hills where her cousin, I guess it was, Elizabeth, lived, because Gabriel had told her that Elizabeth, in her old age, was already 6 months along in a pregnancy, and this would be a man of God. So Mary hurried off to that place, found her cousin Elizabeth, and by the way, when the baby inside Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, he jumped. And she told Mary so, that this is the mother of my Lord who has come here. And the babe heard the voice. Then you read, as the chapter goes on, verses 46 through 55 of Luke 1, Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord." And in Latin, this is called the Magnificat. Catholics put a lot of stock in this, but it's not Mary who had the Immaculate Conception, who was born of Immaculate Conception, but it was the child inside her. Yes, that's a mistake that is made and taught. Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord." But these words are beautiful, folks, and they have so much in them that we would benefit from. Here we go. "My spirit has rejoiced in God my Savior, for he has regarded the lowly estate of his maidservant. For behold, henceforth all generations will call me blessed. For he who is mighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. And his mercy is on those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has put down the mighty from their thrones and exalted the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, as he spoke to our fathers, to Abraham and to his seed forever." And we have one more hymn. It's number 530. It is Well With My Soul.